Cropey. Welcome to FLX Weekly here inside the FingerLakes1.com studios on May 24th, 2023. I'm joined by Fred and Noah Bassette of Airy Vineyard in Interlaken, where they have just opened a new wine tasting space for their first season. They started welcoming guests late April, and there's a great history to the property and to their family's connection to the property that we'll delve into. So we'll be talking all about it as we inch closer to Memorial Day weekend and the unofficial start of summer here in the Finger Lakes. Today's show is brought to you by Seneca Falls Acupuncture. Get your glow back at Seneca Falls Acupuncture. Gorgeous skin is rooted in good health and internal balance. Tap into the power of cosmetic acupuncture to maintain beautiful, healthy skin no matter your age. Learn more and book online at SenecaFallsAcupuncture.com. And by Blush by CV Designs in downtown Seneca Falls, a local woman-owned business in the heart of the Finger Lakes, offering women's clothing and accessories, quality home goods, and unique gifts. Browse their products at shopcvdesigns.com or stop and see Christine Van Duzen and her team on Fall Street in downtown Seneca Falls. So glad to be back here in the studio and really excited to talk to Fred and Noah Bassette. Welcome, guys. And thanks for making the drive up from Interlaken. And first off, Fred, Airy Vineyard, new winery into the scene here with all the wineries here in the Finger Lakes. But one thing that I noticed that makes you guys unique is the history of the property and your family's connection to the property. So why don't you fill us in on a little bit of that history?
Sure. So the property was bought by my grandfather, Fred Freestone, whom I'm named after, and he and his family moved into it in 1918. They actually moved from the house next door that ended up going to my mom's sister and her husband several years later. So Grandpa Fred and Susan lived there until sometime, I think, in the 30s. Anyway, my parents were given the property when they got married in the early 50s, and Dad did a small, well, at that time it was a big chicken farm to sell eggs.
And that's where you were born?
Yeah, Mom grew up there, and I grew up there, along with my brother and sister. So Dad continued to farm the land until I think around the 80s, and he just got too old to farm it, and he started renting it out to an area farmer for crops, oats, wheat, corn, soybean. And then when I inherited it in 2014, we had already developed the plan for the vineyard. And 2014 was the year we cleaned out a lot of stuff. Like old farms, there's a lot of old equipment that's better to go to the metal salvage yard or be sold. Mm-hmm. We tore down a couple of barns, some old sheds, did some field prep work, so that we then started planning in 2015.
And then so vines went in 2015, and how long does that take before you're ready to harvest grapes?
So our first harvest was in 2017. Usually you plant in May and you harvest in the fall 2 years later. And we've been planting more every year or two. Now we've got, with what was planted just last week, we're at 21 acres with 8 different varieties of grapes.
Gotcha. So did you go to high school, South Seneca High School?
Yeah, I graduated as one of the first graduating classes of the merged school.
Okay. Yep.
Yep.
And Noah, I take it you grew up in this house as well?
I did not. When my dad went and worked at Kodak after he graduated college, so I grew up in Honeyway Falls.
All right.
But I would spend summers there, holidays with the grandparents. We also have a cottage on Cayuga Lake as well, so we would spend time down there often.
And so how did you come involved in the winery?
So when I was getting out of the Navy, I was in the Navy for 5 years. When I was getting out and moving back here, was right when we were kind of planting the vineyard, and I knew I'd help out as best I could, but I needed a day job to pay the bills. Mm-hmm. And so I started working at some wineries around, because I'm like, well, I'll learn the vineyard with the family, but I can go learn some of the other aspects of the wine industry at a local winery, and that's when I got bit by the wine bug. And I just loved it from starting there. And then a few years after we were selling and growing, I started not pestering my dad, but kind of, if we ever want to make wine ourselves, I'd be fine with that.
So are you the winemaker?
So our wine is, since we we don't have a production space at the property yet. So I work with a winery up the road with their production team to make our wine. So it's like I do some, but I don't do all of it. Like they do a lot of the hard work.
Yeah.
When we make the blends, like we have a white blend and a red blend, so I do the blending trials for that, and I kind of know the goal of the wines that we want to make. So I work with them to make the wines.
Gotcha. I definitely want to get into the wines that you're producing, but I'm just really fascinated by the history of the property. Now, the farmhouse was built in 1840.
That's what my parents told me. It was 1841. I have no real knowledge. There's an interesting piece of trivia about the property. So it's on what's called Foots Corners Road. The house is at the corner of Foots Corners Road and Deerlick Springs Road, a couple of relatively short roads in the area. I found an old map, 1800 and something map of Seneca County, and it's like the topographic maps. They have the little squares for the houses. And next to the house, the word Foots is there. And I believe that Mr. Foots lived in that house, and that's why it's called Foots Corners Road.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy. So there's a little more history that I didn't get into before. The property that Mom and Dad got from Grandpa Fred was 21 acres that had the farmhouse and the fields that run east from there, which we now have filled out with 16 acres of vines. In the 50s, as Dad was expanding the chicken business, he bought another 64 acres that are across the road from the 20 and down to the north from Foots Corners Road. And I know he bought that in part to have more land to grow more food for the chickens, to grow more grain. But I also think he bought it because it had a nice flat spot on it that he could put in a grass runway because he loved to fly and owned a couple different airplanes over the years. And so that's where the name Airy Acres Vineyard comes from.
Oh, okay.
Airport is called Airy Acres Airport. It's on the aviation maps.
Is the runway still there?
It's still there. It's a private grass runway. You're only supposed to land on it with permission ahead of time. So when we were trying to decide what are we going to call this vineyard thing, it was, let's call it Airy Acres Vineyard. It's like blinding glimpse of the obvious. That's the best name to use.
Yeah. I was talking to Noah before the show, and if you look at the wine labels, you can see the propeller at the top of the grapes. The actual top of the grapes is an airplane propeller.
What looks like a stem is
Yeah.
actually a propeller.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah,
It's a really interesting, label too. It really kind of stands out, and it seems like you're able to show the type of grapes that are inside by the colors that are on the label. So let's talk about the wines a little bit. Right now, you guys make 3 dry reds, a rosé, and 5 white wines. Why don't you just talk a little bit about the grapes themselves?
Sure. Yeah. So
Wines.
we grow 8 different varietals right now, 4 whites and 4 reds. So whites we have Riesling, Gewürz, Chardonnay, and Arcatzelli. And the reds we have Cab Franc, Cab Sauv, Lemberger, and Saperavi. Arcatzelli and Saperavi are 2 of those Georgian varietals that are starting to get a little bit more popular in the region. So we planted some of those to be a little different with that as well. We get our first harvest of Saperavi and Arcatzelli this year, so we don't have any wines from that yet.
What was the second one you mentioned? The
Arcatzelli.
Yeah, that's one I hadn't heard of. I've heard of all the others. Is that something that's commonly grown around here, or
It's less common. It's another one of those Georgian varietals similar to Saperavi. Last I checked, there's only 2 other growers of Arcatzelli, and that's Dr. Frank and McGregor.
Okay.
So
I know Dr. Frank, I think, does a Saperavi too.
yes, they do.
Yeah.
There's like 11 or 12 growers of Saperavi around.
I really like Saperavi with a pasta, so I'm glad to hear you guys are growing that. And then the red Cab Franc, which is something that I think has really taken hold in the Finger Lakes, is where our climate is certainly conducive to growing good Cab Franc.
Yeah. And that Lemberger too.
Lemberger, yep, that's another one you see.
Yeah. So the reds that we have right now is a Cab Franc and a Lemberger, and then we have a Cab Lemberger blend that we call the Osprey because we have some ospreys that nest near the vineyards.
Right.
And so we like to say they protect the vine, so we named a wine after them. We do have some rosé, like you mentioned, and then we have typical dry Riesling, typical semi-dry Riesling, some Gewürztraminer. We have a little unique also. We have a bubbly Gewürztraminer. We call it the Glide.
Okay.
Nice, refreshing wine. And then we have that white blend of Riesling and Gewürz. We call it the Cross.
So, is this your first production,
So our
or
first,
did you do one last year?
so our first batch was technically from 2020 vintage.
Okay.
It was kind of like a trial run. We
Yeah.
just made a Cab Franc and a Riesling, about 100 cases total. And then from 2021 vintage is when we kind of doubled down. Made a little over 1,000 cases of wine from all those SKUs. We actually also just released our new Chardonnay. I almost forgot that one too.
Yeah. And the bubbly rosé is coming out real soon.
Yeah, that got bottled on last Friday.
It was bottled last Thursday or Friday, and they had some troubles putting the labels on.
Really?
And I think we'll have that by the end of the week and be releasing it in another week or so.
Yeah.
So in all, from this vintage, how many bottles of wine or cases have you produced?
So from the 2021 harvest, we made about 1,200 cases. From the 2022 harvest, we bottled, I think, around 400 whites, and then the reds will be bottled later. There'll be another 300 or so reds.
So, as a new winery, how do you get your foot in the door in terms of distribution and
So Noah's been doing a great job on social media, on Facebook and Instagram. We've slowly been building an email list, and we send emails out to people who visit us or are interested.
Mhm.
We've recently gotten articles in a couple of hard copy news places. Finger Lakes Times had one last week. Of course, we get this opportunity.
Mhm.
I think Noah's working on the Democrat and Chronicle
Yeah, I was
and
emailing.
the Ithaca Times, so we're kind of trying to use the paper media as well.
Well, it's great.
And we've got our wines in a few retail stores and a few restaurants to get some exposure.
Mhm.
And then we're doing a kind of a unique thing. There's a organization called Harvest Host, which is, I call it a club for RVs. As a host, we are not obligated to provide them any hookups. They are not obligated to pay us anything, but the understanding is when they go to a Harvest Host, they will buy some of that place's products.
Okay.
So if you're a winery, it's a win-win for everybody
Mhm.
because they don't have to pay to park their RV someplace.
Right, and they can
come-
spend the night on your
they
property.
spend the night on the property. There are people that are going to buy wine anyway.
Yeah.
So they buy wine that they're going to buy anyway, and they get to stay. In our case, it's a very nice view of Cayuga Lake from it.
Mhm.
I call it free advertising that I get paid for.
Right.
We've had people from Oregon, Washington, Texas, D.C., I think maybe one from Maine.
Kind of word of mouth.
They're as people with RVs, you get
Yeah.
listed on the Harvest Host website.
Okay.
So if somebody is coming, they look for a place to stay in the area they're traveling through. We had somebody come through last week from Canada. So it's interesting. You meet a lot of great, interesting people,
Yeah.
and the word gets out. Who knows where?
Yeah, and it is amazing. I think residents here in the Finger Lakes who aren't involved in the tourist industry might not realize how many people do come, consistently from all over the world. So it's great to have different types of offerings, and I think what you're offering is something that's a little unique and different. And so, what can someone expect? Let's say me and my friends were gonna stop in and visit for a tasting. What would that experience be like?
Yeah, Noah can describe that better, I think.
So right now we have our outside tasting space right by the Vineyard, because currently we're working on converting my grandmother's the old farmhouse to be the full-time tasting room.
Mhm.
So that project is in the works right now. Hopefully next year that should be ready to go full bore. But right now, nice little like semi-covered space. We got lawn chairs. I got a bar out there. It's pretty rustic and simple, but that's how you start out.
Well, that's also kind of like what the when someone's flipping through tourism magazines or looking for that experience. That's kind of what a lot of people want is
Yeah.
not to be necessarily inside, but to be outside, looking at the lake next to the vineyards,
Oh, yeah.
enjoying the weather. So that definitely sounds like an enjoyable time, and to be, in the history of the property, which
Right.
is something that I think differentiates what you have from
Yeah.
a lot of the other wineries.
And while we're
Well,
there,
We started doing that last summer. We had an open house in August, and we invited lots of people we knew, and we started doing tastings by appointment from this space
Mhm.
by the vineyard. And one of the things that encouraged me is how so many people would come and say how much they liked the wine. And so I say to people now, it's a simple, humble space with a nice view and some great wine. And we had the first day that we were open for the regular hours on the 27th of April, 6 women came in that were all friends together, and they knew about it somehow. I think maybe no one knew one of them. They showed up. We opened at 11. They showed up at 1 o'clock. They were super excited that they were the first people on the first day.
Mm-hmm.
They brought snacks with them. They stayed until we closed at 6, and they ate their snacks. And as the sun went down and the shadow moved, they kept moving their chairs farther out to stay in the sun and the
Right.
grass. And yeah,
Yeah, that's
it was.
sounds like an awesome experience. So, being so new, it's interesting because the property's obviously been there for, geez, 200, 1840, 1940, getting close to 200 years, and it's been used for different things. And you grew up there, so, but yeah, it's a fresh start from the winery. So, what's the plans for the future? Like, what are you working towards?
Right. So the initial vision when we started was to only sell grapes to local wineries. But before we inherited the land, my wife and I were like, what are we going to do with this 85 acres that we're going to inherit? Are we going to sell it? Are we going to keep it and keep renting it out to the local farmer? What are we going to do? And the idea came about over time. Our son-in-law, Nate, he and our daughter Adele used to live down in New Jersey, and he had a job that paid the bills, but he wasn't too happy about. He's a real outdoors kind of person, loves to grow things. And it was like, can we figure out a way they could make a living off the farm? And the answer that looked the best was to do the vineyard.
Mm-hmm.
And then when Noah came up with the idea of, gee, can we start selling wine? So now the vision is to create a business that will at least support 2 families, and a little more,
Mm-hmm.
and it'll end up being passed on to Nate and Noah, and
And hopefully, on and on.
who knows, right? Our one son does a lot of computer stuff. He does all the website work for us. Our one grandson, Nate and Adele, our daughter and her husband, moved up here last September. So grandson Noah, who was looking for some part-time work, he's working in the vineyard. He's actually out there in the vineyard today working. So it's a family thing.
Yeah.
Our one other son, Josh, is a teacher up in Rochester. He likes to work in the vineyard in the summer when school's out. So the vision is to grow it to probably a 4,000 to 5,000 case a year business, which would be more than enough to support 2
Sure.
families.
Now, do you still sell grapes to
Yeah.
other wineries as well? Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that in the region,
Oh,
right?
there's a large variation of combinations of places that grow all their own grapes or grow very few of their grapes.
Yeah.
And they make the wine, somebody else makes the wine. There's a lot of different
Do
combinations.
you bring any grapes in for your wine? So all your wines are grown
Yeah.
on the property.
Yep, on the property. And this year, well, again, it's still farming. I mean,
Right.
vineyards have this romantic allure that comes to them from the movies, but it's still farming. And last year was a bad year for various reasons. This year we had the frost damage last
Yeah.
week.
How did you handle that?
I think, after talking to other vineyard owners, I think we got off light. I think in total, maybe we had about a 20% loss of leaves and
Mhm.
frost damage. I've talked to other people that are like 80, 90%, 100% damage.
Horrible, and that's the farming aspect of it. it's there's a lot of intangibles, a lot of things that can go wrong, and that's one of the from a consumer perspective, that's one of the more interesting things about wines is that different vintages are based on different conditions and different seasons. So the story so far of this season was that hard frost last Wednesday night, about a week ago. Yeah, I lost some flowers.
Yeah, lots of people lost things. So I plan to sell about half of what we grow. It might be less, depending on what we actually end up producing this year. So we've been selling to Damiani Wine Cellars, Buttonwood Grove Winery, and the newly renamed 680 Wine Cellars.
Yeah, I'm one of my favorites.
And we sold the first year to Boundary Breaks, and then they had enough of their own. They didn't sell again after that, and we've sold some to Montezuma.
Yep, right up the road here. They do a
Right.
lot of
So-
experimental.
So the plan for
Winemaking.
this year is to make around 2,000 to 2,500 cases and sell the rest, whatever the rest turns out to be.
Well, it's exciting. I know I'm looking forward to, like I said, getting down there to Interlaken very soon. And with Memorial Day weekend, summer's here. So one of the things that my friends and I like to do when we get a chance is to head out to different parts of the region and hit some wineries, some old favorites and some new. And certainly I'm going to make a point that we visit Airy Acres. Where can people find you online?
AiryAcresVineyard.com,
Okay.
and there is a Facebook page by a name very similar to that.
I think it's Airy Acres Vine is the
Yeah.
handle for Facebook and Instagram.
And I mean, people we can ship to 41 states. People can order online and pick up. We're flexible that way. We're open regularly 11 to 6 Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, although we're going to be open this Sunday afternoon and Monday because of the holiday weekend.
We do also have a little fledgling wine club as well.
Okay.
34 members, I believe.
Oh, nice.
That's one of those things that we'll eventually grow and do more with. I mean, technically we have 2 library wines, which is those 2, the 2020 Cab Franc and the 2020 Riesling that we made. Only a handful of cases left of those, but something
Both of
special.
which got
They both won awards. Yeah.
both got awards.
That had to be satisfying right off the
Oh,
bat to be.
It was.
Yeah.
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 And we also, if you go to the website, you can schedule a tasting on Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday.
Okay.
And we're getting more and more of those.
Yeah, because then the goal is next year with the farmhouse tasting room will be unfinished enough that we can do 5 days a week there or more. Go full bore there. We'll plan on trying to get some kind of small kitchen in there, nice big deck, do music, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. The possibilities are endless.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
We definitely want to grow the space, but like we mentioned, only 4,000 or 5,000 cases of wine at the end, because still the goal is to have it be small and intimate, the family experience. Because right now, if you come to the vineyard, I'll be there half the time. My mom or my sister will be there too. You get the whole family there.
Well, that's great, and congratulations on getting to this point where you're actually an operating vineyard and winery, and it certainly was a great transformation for the property and next chapter in the Bassett family farm, right?
I tell people we're in year 10 of a multi-year journey. We started in 2015, clearing out, basically, when the barn was built in 15. The vines were planted first in 15, and we're just slowly growing.
It has been about 10 years. When somebody says 2015, I don't think of that as 10 years ago, but it really is getting there, right? Yeah.
2014, if you start counting at 14,
Yep.
13 becomes the 10th year.
Right.
23 becomes the 10th year.
Right.
And it'll keep growing, and I'm trying to work myself out of a job.
Yeah.
Well, as I mentioned, it is Memorial Day weekend, so that means big celebration in Waterloo this weekend. Celebrate, commemorate. You can get their full schedule online at waterloony.com, Friday through Tuesday. I think the official Memorial Day celebration officially is Tuesday. We celebrate Memorial Day on Monday. Should be a great weekend. The weather looks great. Friday, sunny with a high near 68. Saturday, sunny with a high near 75. And then we really get into some summer-like weather on Sunday. More sun, high near 80. And then Memorial Day, sunny, high near 82. You just couldn't ask for a better weekend to get out there, do that final yard work that you need to get done to end up your spring cleaning, or head out to a wine trail, visit Airy Acres, head to Waterloo for some of their festivities. There's just so much to do in the Finger Lakes here in the summer, and I say the unofficial start of summer being Memorial Day. So again, you guys are open 11 through 6, Thursday through Saturday, and then this week and for Memorial Day you'll be open for Sunday, Monday.
Sunday afternoon, probably 1 to 5.
Okay.
And then Monday, 11 to 6.
All right, and you can check them online at Airy Acres. Sorry, what was the website again? I don't want to get it wrong.
AiryAcresVineyard.com.
.com. Okay, gotcha.
A-I-R-Y, Airy.
All right, well, Fred and Noah, thanks a lot for coming in. Congratulations on the success, and hopefully amazing future. I'm looking forward to trying the wine and stopping in and seeing the location. So congratulations. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having us.
So that's going to do it for this edition of FLX Weekly. Thanks for joining us. If you enjoyed the show, click like, share, or subscribe on YouTube or on your favorite podcasting platform. We'll be back next Wednesday. It'll be more wine next Wednesday, as Catherine Chase from the Cayuga Lake Wine Trail is back for some food and wine pairings. So until then, have a great Memorial Day weekend here in the Finger Lakes.